I had my daughter behind me and a blade in front of me, and the man holding it was the man I had thanked in my prayers for 5 years. That is the part that broke something in me. Not the edge of the knife, not the dark, not the horses screaming somewhere behind the trees. It was his face. The kind, tired, familiar face of the only person who had ever helped me, looking at my child the way a man looks at a sum he needs to cross out. I had trusted him with the truth no one else alive knew, and he had known what to do with it from the very first day. "Don't," I said. "She's 5. She's only 5. I know exactly how old she is," he said gently, because he had always been gentle, and that was how he had fooled me. I have known to the day. Somewhere in the dark behind him, something enormous began, very quietly, to run. But I am starting at the worst of it, and you will not understand why it cut so deep unless I take you back to the beginning, to the village, and the quiet, and the 5 years I spent making myself into no one at all. I had learned to ask for nothing. That was the whole of my craft in those years. A woman who asks for nothing draws no eyes. She pays her own way, mends her own roof, owes no one a favour that could become a question. I rented 2 rooms above a weaver's shop in a village 4 days' ride from any packland. I took in sewing, and I read letters for those who could not. And when people asked where the child's father was, I said the sea had him, and the sea is a thing no one argues with. The child's name was Nell, and she was the reason for all of it, and she was the one part of my careful, invisible life that refused to be invisible. She was loud. She was fearless in the specific, exhausting way of a creature who has never once been given a reason to be afraid. She befriended every dog in the village and several that were only passing through. She carried everywhere a small wooden wolf, no bigger than her fist, worn smooth at the ears from 5 years of being held, the one thing I had taken with me the night I ran, the one thing I could not make myself leave behind. I told her I had whittled it. It was the first lie I ever told her, and not the last, and it was the smallest. She had her father's eyes. I had spent 5 years arranging her hair to fall over them, keeping her chin down in front of strangers, teaching her without ever explaining why that some people you do not look at directly. Grey going to amber at the centre, a colour you do not see in our village, a colour you see in exactly one bloodline in the Iron Territories, and I had carried it 4 days' ride, and hidden it under a fringe of brown hair, and I had almost convinced myself it would be enough. It held for 5 years. It did not hold for 5 seconds once the king looked at her. The pack does not come to our village. There is no reason. We are too far and too small, and we have nothing the wolves want. So when word came down the road that the Alpha King himself was passing through on a border circuit, that the king of the Iron Territories would water his horses at our well on his way to somewhere that mattered, the whole village turned out, and I did the only sensible thing, which was to take my daughter by the hand and start walking the other way. The law would tell you an alpha's bond is a living thing that does not die just because the distance is great, that a wolf knows its own across a continent if it ever knew them at all. I did not let myself believe that law. I had spent 5 years not believing it, because believing it meant believing he might still be looking, and a woman who lets herself be looked for stops being careful. I was not careful enough. Nell saw the horses. A 5-year-old who has never seen a warhorse will not be dragged away from 20 of them by a mother trying not to be noticed. She pulled her hand from mine. She was fast. She had always been fast. And she ran out into the road to see, and her fringe blew back off her face in the wind the horses made. And she stood in the middle of the road, looking up, fearless, delighted, with her father's eyes wide open to the sun. And the Alpha King of the Iron Territories, who had been moving through our village like weather, stopped. I have replayed it 1,000 times, and I still cannot tell you how long he sat that horse without moving. Long enough that his guard noticed. Long enough that the whole laughing crowd went quiet, because when a man that powerful goes, that still, the air changes, and people who live close to the ground learn to feel it before they understand it. He looked at my daughter the way a man looks at something he buried, and is now watching walk toward him in the daylight. I came out of the crowd because there was nothing else to do. You do not leave your child alone in front of a stopped wolf. I came out with my eyes down and my heart trying to climb out of my throat, and I took Nell's hand, and I said the words I had practiced for 5 years without ever believing I would need them. Your pardon, my lord. She forgets her manners. He did not look at Nell any more. He was looking at me, and I watched the most feared wolf alive, a man I had last seen across a council fire 5 years and a lifetime ago, lose every scrap of the composure his whole legend was built on. He came down off that horse like a man stepping into deep water. He said one word, not my name, worse than my name. He said, "You drowned." If you have ever rebuilt your whole life around a thing you believed was true, and then watched a stranger say 4 words that pull the floor out from under all of it, if you know that exact vertigo, then stay with me, because everything I thought I knew about the night I ran was wrong, and I was about to find out in the middle of a village road with my daughter's hand in mine. Stay. This is where the secret stops being mine. I did not faint, and I did not run, though I considered both. What I did was the thing I had been doing for 5 years. I got very calm and very small, and I tried to make the moment end. You have me confused with someone, my lord, I said. I'm a seamstress. My husband was a fisherman. Orla. He said my name like it cost him something to spend it. I had your name carved. I have walked past it every day for 5 years. That stopped me. I had been braced for anger, for the king's fury at the woman who had vanished, for the cold question of where I had been. I was not braced for grief. His grief was the thing I could not account for, because in the story I had carried for 5 years, he was the one who had wanted me gone. His guard had formed up around us by then, and the village had pulled back to a frightened ring, and into that ring stepped the second reason my legs nearly went out from under me. Lord Roderick. The king's cousin, the man who 5 years ago had come to me in the dark and told me the king had signed the order, that a low-born woman carrying the Alpha's child was a threat the council would not tolerate, that Eirik himself had put his seal to my death to keep his throne and his alliance, that my only hope was to run that very night, and that he, Roderick, out of the goodness of a heart I would thank forever, would help me do it. He had given me coin. He had given me a horse. He had sent a quiet stipend to a village 4 days away every season since, the only thread between me and the world I fled, and I had taught my daughter to say a prayer of thanks for the kind Lord who watched over us from far away. He stepped into that ring now, and his kind, tired face took in Nell's eyes in one sweep, and I watched him do a piece of arithmetic I did not yet understand. Then he turned to the king with a sorrow so perfectly shaped I would never have questioned it. "Cousin," he said softly, "come away. The child's resemblance is a cruelty, nothing more. The countryside is full of grey-eyed children. Do not let an old wound undo you in front of strangers." His hand settled on the king's arm. "Let me handle this. Let me speak with the woman. You should not be the one." It was so smooth, it was so kind, and 5 years ago I would have let it carry me, the way it had carried me out of the only home I had. But I had spent 5 years reading faces for a living, reading what people wanted under what they said. Because a woman alone learns to see the second meaning, or she does not stay safe. And I saw, in the half-second before he smoothed it away, the thing under Roderick's sorrow when he looked at my daughter. It was not grief. It was a problem he had thought was solved, standing in a road, holding a wooden wolf. That was the moment everything turned. Not the king's stillness, not Nell's eyes. That, the flat, fast calculation in the face of the man I had thanked in my prayers, doing his sums over my child's head. I did not understand it yet, but I had stopped, finally, after 5 years being grateful. "No," I said. Roderick blinked. "My dear, you will not speak with me alone." I heard my own voice come out level and cold, a voice the seamstress did not own, a voice from before. I turned to the king, to Eirik, and I made the choice I had spent 5 years swearing I would never make. I stopped hiding. "Whatever you think you signed 5 years ago, I would like to see it. The order, I would like to see it in your hand." The king went very still again, but it was a different stillness. "I never signed an order against you," he said. "I have spent 5 years believing raiders took your boat on the crossing. I had the shoreline searched until the snow came. I had it searched again the next spring." His eyes moved, slowly, terribly, to his cousin's hand still resting on his arm. "Who told you I signed an order, Orla?" The whole road heard the silence that followed. Roderick recovered well. I will give him that. He had been recovering well for 5 years. He laughed, sad and gentle, and said something about a grieving woman's confusion, and a clever forger in the chaos of that summer, and how these things happen, and how the kindest course was to let the poor creature go quietly back to her village with a purse for her trouble. But the king was not listening to his cousin anymore. He had crouched down in the road, slow and careful, bringing himself to the height of a 5-year-old, and he was looking at Nell, who had been watching all of this with the frank interest of a child who does not yet know she is the centre of it. "That's a fine wolf," he said to her. His voice had gone rough. "Who made it for you?" "Mamma did," Nell told him, with total confidence, and held it up so he could see. "But she did it wrong. The ears are too smooth. I had carved nothing. He knew it. He had carved those ears himself, years ago, sitting by a fire, with a knife and a piece of pine, and a woman who teased him that a king should have better things to whittle. The ears were smooth because a small hand had worn them smooth, holding on for 5 years. He looked at that wolf in his daughter's fist, and the most feared man in the Iron Territories put one hand over his mouth and could not speak. I want to tell you I felt triumph. I did not. I felt the bottom drop out of 5 years of certainty, and I felt the cold, specific horror of understanding all at once, who had really sent me running into the dark, and that I had taught my child to thank him for it every night. They did not let Roderick slip away that day, but they did not take him either, because a king's cousin is not arrested in a village road on a seamstress's word and the flinch of a face. Eirik knew it. Roderick knew it. The law needed proof, and the only proof was a forged order 5 years cold, and the forger was a man who had spent those years making himself indispensable. So Roderick did what cornered men do. He went very quiet and very helpful, and he waited for his chance to finish the sum. The king brought us to the keep, me and Nell both, in a closed carriage with Leif, his second, riding so close to the door that I understood we were being guarded and watched in equal measure. I did not protest. I had spent 5 years asking for nothing, and I found that the habit had a crack in it now, and through the crack came a thing I had not let myself want. I wanted my daughter to be safe, and for the first time the safest place might be the one I had run from. The keep was everything I remembered and had tried to forget. And Eirik, when he finally came to me that first night, in a room they had given me that was far too fine, with Nell asleep against my side and the little wooden wolf on the pillow. Eirik came and stood at the door the way I remembered him standing at doors, near and not crossing, a king who had never in his life learned how to ask for the thing he wanted. "I kept your room," he said. It was not what either of us expected him to say. 5 years. The council thought I was mad. Perhaps I was. His eyes went to the child and away, as if looking too long would undo him. I am trying to be careful with this. I am not. I have never been good at the soft thing. But I need you to know I did not let you go. I was never given the chance to let you go. It was taken from me, the same as it was taken from you. 3 sentences passed where the old Eirik would have stopped, and he kept going. Because grief that has waited 5 years does not keep to account. "I don't know how to be angry at you for hiding her," he said. "I have tried, on the ride here. I keep arriving at the same place. You hid her because you believed I would kill her. And the unbearable part is that you were right to believe it. Not about me, but about this court, this throne, the things men do near it. You did exactly what a good mother does. I cannot fault you for the one thing I most wish had gone another way." His jaw worked. "Her ears are too smooth. She holds it when she's frightened," I said. "She's held it a great deal." He closed his eyes. I should tell you that I did not soften easily. 5 years of asking for nothing does not melt in a single night of fine rooms, and kept rooms, and a king who could not finish his sentences. I had carried this child alone through fevers and hard winters and 100 nights of fear, and I was not about to hand her trust, or my own, to a man because his grief was real. Real grief is not the same as safe. But I watched him with her over the days that followed, and what I watched was not a king acquiring an heir. It was a man who had decided, without announcing it, that he would never again be the reason that child held her wolf in fear, and who set about it clumsily, formally, leaving small carved things outside her door because he did not know how to simply give them to her, sitting through her exhausting, fearless chatter with the stunned patience of a man learning a language late. Nell, for her part, adopted him with the brutal efficiency of the very young. She had decided he was hers. She informed him of this. He did not argue. The king of the Iron Territories, who could end a man with a word, was simply told by a 5-year-old that he belonged to her, and he accepted the ruling without appeal. That was the thing that undid me, in the end. Not the grief, the way he let her win. The mid-story turn, when it came in the council hall, and it nearly took everything. Roderick had not been idle. A man does not protect a 5-year lie by being idle. He had spent the days at the keep, doing what he did best, being helpful, being trusted, being near, and he had reached the same conclusion I had. which was that the wooden wolf was the only object in the world that could damn him. Not the order. The order was ash, undeniable, but a thing the king carved with his own hands, in a child's fist, was a truth no forger could unwrite. While the keep argued over law and proof, Roderick decided to remove the proof. He took her at dusk, quietly, kindly, the way he did everything, the trusted cousin walking the little princess to see the horses. And who would question that? By the time I understood the silence where Nell's noise should have been, he had a quarter-hour's start, and he was making for the border woods, and he had a blade, and he meant the only kind of solution that closes a question forever. I did not wait for the guard. I want to be honest about that, because the story the court tells has the king's warriors riding to the rescue. And they did ride, but they rode behind me. I went out the postern with the little wooden wolf in my fist. Nell had dropped it in the courtyard, the way she never dropped it, and I have thought since that even at 5 she knew to leave a trail, and I ran into the dark after my daughter, because I had spent 5 years keeping her safe, and I was not going to stop now for the sake of waiting to be saved, which is where you came in. The blade, the kind, tired, familiar face. My daughter behind me, and 5 years of misplaced gratitude burning to ash in my chest. Roderick, who had known her age to the day. "You forged it," I said. I was not asking. All of it. His seal. The order. My death. You sent me running, and you told him I drowned, and you have spent 5 years making sure neither of us ever learned otherwise. You were a complication, he said, and there was no gentleness left in it now. Only the tiredness, the long arithmetic of a man who had been carrying a sum for 5 years. A low-born woman and a half-blood heir between me and a throne my line has better claim to. I gave you a life, Orla, a quiet one. I only ever asked you to stay small and stay gone. You could not even manage that. No, I said, I never could. And here is the part the court got wrong, the part everyone expects to go the other way. They expect the king to come crashing through the trees and put himself between the blade and his child, the wolf rescuing the woman, the way it always goes. He was coming. I could hear him coming, that enormous quiet running in the dark. But he was not going to reach us in time, and I knew it, and Roderick knew it, and so it was not the king who stepped between Lord Roderick and the child. It was me. I had nothing. No wolf, no warrior's strength, no blade of my own. What I had was the old bond, the one I had torn 5 years ago to survive the running, because a severed bond cannot be tracked, and tearing it had nearly killed me then, and had left a cold place in my chest ever since that no fire ever reached. I had spent 5 years with that wound packed in ice and silence. I reached for it now. I tore the ice off it on purpose. I do not have good words for what that cost. A bond half severed and left to scar does not want to be woken. When I reached down the broken length of it toward the wolf running through the dark, the old magic fought me, cold driving up through my bones like a spike of winter, the wound tearing open along its full length at once, and I gripped the little wooden wolf so hard the worn ears cut my palm, and the blood ran warm over the smooth places my daughter's hands had made. I went to my knees with it. But I held the bond open, screaming down it the one thing a severed mate bond will still carry even broken. Here, here, she is here, come! And I felt, far off, and then suddenly not far off at all, the answer flare back up the line like a fire catching. Roderick's blade came down. It did not land. The king came out of the dark not as a man, but as the thing his legend was built on, and he took the blade meant for his daughter on his own body, and bore his cousin to the ground, and the woods filled with the sound of a reckoning 5 years overdue. I will spare you the particulars. Roderick had spent 5 years being careful, and it bought him nothing in the end, because the king's wolf had finally been told, in the only language a broken bond can still speak, exactly who had been keeping it from its own. When it was over, Eirik came to where I knelt with Nell already wrapped around me, and he was bleeding and shaking and entirely undone, and he did not reach for the child first. He reached for my hand, the one gripping the bloodied wolf, and he opened my fingers gently, one at a time, and looked at the cut the worn ears had made, and at the bond I had torn open to call him, and his face did the thing it had been trying not to do since a village road. "You came back up the bond," he said, "after what it cost you to tear it. You knew what it would do." "I had learnt to ask for nothing," I said. My voice was not steady now. I had let that go. It turns out that was the lie. I just hadn't found the thing I'd ask anything for. I looked down at the child between us, and the wolf in my ruined hand, and the man bleeding in the dark, who had kept my room for 5 years. I found her first, and then I found the rest of you, 4 days too late, and 5 years too long. He pressed his forehead to our joined hands, the way I would learn his wolf did when it had run too far and needed to be told it was home. We stayed like that until the cold let go of my chest at last, the bond knitting back along its broken length, warm where it had been ice for 5 years. The kiss came later, and it was brief, and I will keep it, the way I have kept very little else in this telling. I only know that it was the first thing in 5 years I did not narrate to myself, even once while it happened, and that when it ended Nell informed us both that we were being slow. Which was, I have to say, entirely fair. The fallout was real, because it always is. A king's cousin does not fall without taking pieces of the court with him. Roderick had allies, and quiet debts, and a faction that had quietly preferred his claim, and the spring was full of careful letters and careful men deciding whether a king who had hidden a low-born mate and a half-blood heir for 5 years, even unknowingly, was a king they still feared. Eirik answered all of it the same way. He stood my daughter on the dais of the great hall, in front of the whole court that had spent 5 years believing the iron line had no heir, and he put the little carved wolf in her hands where everyone could see it, and he named her his, not legitimized quietly, in a back room, with conditions. Named, out loud. At cost, and then he did the thing I will love him for until I die. He turned to the court, and he did not explain me, or apologize for me, or soften me into something palatable. He said only, she tore her own bond to keep this child from my throne, because she believed my throne would kill her. She was very nearly right. Anyone in this hall who would have proven her right may leave now and save us all the trouble of finding you later. No one left. A truth, set down plainly, ends most things. It is a year on now as I tell you this. Roderick is in the cold cells of the northern hold, stripped of his name and his claim, and the faction that preferred him has found other things to prefer. Nell has a wing of the keep terrorized, and a father who whittles her a new animal every week, badly, on purpose, so she can tell him the ears are wrong. The wooden wolf, the first one, the smooth one, sits on the high table now, the most precious thing in a room full of gold, and I have stopped explaining to people why. I run no seamstress's shop. I gave up asking for nothing the night I learned what it had cost me. These days I ask for a great deal, loudly, and the King of the Iron Territories has developed the harried, devoted expression of a man who has discovered that the quiet, invisible woman he mourned for 5 years was never quiet at all. She was only saving it up. Some nights, when the crown sits too heavy and the man needs to stop being king for an hour, a great wolf comes and sets its head in my lap in the dark, and a small girl, with her father's eyes, crawls in under his chin, with the smooth wooden wolf clutched in her fist, and I sit with the two of them in the firelight, and I do not ask for anything at all. Not because I have learned to, because for once there is nothing left to ask for. So tell me, do you think I should have known, in that village road 5 years ago, that the kind lord who handed me a horse in the dark was the one I'd one day find standing over my daughter with a knife? I have gone back over every word he ever said to me, looking for the moment I could have seen it, and I still cannot decide whether I was a fool or only a frightened girl who needed the lie to be true. I would genuinely like to know what you would have done. And if you want to hear what Roderick's faction sent down out of the north that spring, because a stripped claim does not stay quiet, and that is a whole winter of its own, comment the wooden wolf, and I will tell you that one next. Stay with me. Pull your chair closer to the fire, wherever you are listening from tonight. There is room by it now. There finally is.